May 12th, 2001. Perry Como lies in his Florida home, the man who serenaded America for 6 decades, drawing his final breaths. The Venetian blinds cast gentle shadows across a peaceful bedroom where no cameras intrude, no spotlights glare, no adoring crowds gather. Just the quiet rhythm of labored breathing from the barber's son who accidentally became one of music's most enduring legends. The television in the corner plays softly, a rerun of his 1975 Christmas special. His own voice drifts through the room singing "It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas," as ironic as it is fitting for this May afternoon. The man who made holiday standards immortal is about to take his final bow, not on a grand stage, but in the same understated way he lived his entire life. In an industry built on noise and scandal, Perry Como's quiet had always been his loudest statement. Outside, the world spins on, unaware that America's most beloved Mr. Nice Guy is slipping away. No paparazzi camp at his door. No tabloid headlines scream about his condition. This is exactly how Pierino Ronald Como wanted it. Private, dignified, surrounded by love rather than fame. The barber who never stopped listening is preparing for his final silence. But something haunts this peaceful moment. How does a man sell over 100 million records, win 5 Emmy Awards, and receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, yet remain virtually unknown to the scandal sheets? In a business where excess was currency and controversy was king, Perry Como lived like the neighbor next door. Was this remarkable normalcy his greatest performance of all, or his quiet rebellion against an industry that devoured its own? As his breathing grows shallower, one question echoes through 7 decades of unprecedented success. Was being genuinely nice in Hollywood the most radical act of all? The answer lies buried in the journey from a small-town barbershop to the pinnacle of American entertainment, where the boy who learned to listen would teach a nation how to feel. To understand how it all ended in such perfect peace, we must first understand how it all began with the sound of scissors and the whisper of dreams. The year was 1912, and Canonsburg, Pennsylvania existed in the shadow of Pittsburgh's steel mills, where Italian immigrants came not seeking fame but simply seeking hope. Into this world of soot-stained ambition came Pierino Ronald Como, born to Pietro and Lucia Como, 2 souls who had crossed an ocean with little more than calloused hands and fierce determination to give their children something better. The Como household buzzed with the music of survival. 13 children, the clatter of Lucia's pots mixing with her haunting Italian folk songs. Pietro's surprisingly gentle tenor emerging after long days at the steel mill. Money was scarce, but there was something else in abundance. The kind of music that came not from instruments, but from hearts that had known both loss and hope. Young Perry absorbed it all with the quiet intensity that would become his trademark. While his brothers wrestled and his sisters gossiped, Perry would sit in the corner listening, always listening. The barber who never stopped listening was learning his first lesson. Music wasn't about making noise, it was about making connection. At 14, practical dreams trumped musical ones. Pietro Como had steelworker plans for his boy. A trade, steady income, security. Perry was apprenticed to Steve Fragapane's barbershop on Washington Avenue, where he would learn to cut hair and build a respectable life. The barbershop became Perry's first stage, though neither he nor his customers knew it yet. Here's where destiny whispered its first secret. As Perry snipped and trimmed, he would hum softly, unconsciously turning routine haircuts into impromptu concerts. Customers began to relax under more than just his gentle touch. They melted under his voice. Men would linger just to hear him sing along with the radio. Steve Fragapane, wise to human nature, quietly adjusted the schedule so Perry worked during the hours when popular songs filled the air. The barbershop taught Perry something profound about performance. The best music came not from desperate reaching, but from quiet confidence. Every customer brought a story, a worry, a dream. Perry learned to listen not just with his ears, but with his soul. He discovered that cutting hair was like singing. Both required attention to detail, both demanded you make people feel better than when they arrived. Could the boy humming over a customer's collar have imagined that this gentle soundtrack would one day soothe an entire nation through war, depression, and change? The signs were everywhere, in the way customers scheduled appointments just to hear him sing, in the way his voice could transform the mundane ritual of a haircut into something approaching magic, in the way he made every person in that chair feel like the most important person in the world. But in 1933, during the depths of America's economic despair, destiny knocked on the barbershop door wearing the face of Freddie Carlone, a local band leader who needed more than just a haircut. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most life-changing moments arrive disguised as ordinary encounters, and that the barber who never stopped listening was about to discover that the whole world was waiting to hear what he had to say. The moment arrived on an autumn afternoon in 1933, wrapped in the ordinary ritual of a haircut. Freddie Carlone settled into Perry's chair, expecting nothing more than a trim and perhaps some small talk about the weather. What he received instead was a private concert that would change two lives forever. Perry worked in his characteristic quiet manner, humming softly as he snipped and shaped. The radio played in the background. "Did you ever see a dream walking?" drifted through the small shop. Without thinking, Perry began to sing along, his voice weaving around the melody with an effortless grace that seemed to transform the very air in the room. Carlone froze. The casual conversation died. In the mirror, his eyes locked onto Perry's reflection, watching this young barber create magic with nothing more than his voice and genuine feeling. When the song ended, Carlone turned in the chair, still half covered in the barber's cape, and asked the question that would echo through entertainment history. "Son, how would you like to make $25 a week singing with my band?" For a 21-year-old barber making $12 a week, it should have been an easy decision. But Perry Como had never been one for easy decisions. The barber shop was security. His customers depended on him. And there was Roselle Belline, whose father already viewed Perry's musical dreams with deep suspicion. Leave a steady trade to chase the most unreliable dream of all? In 1933, when men walked the streets begging for work, the barber who never stopped listening faced his first great choice: the safe scissors in his hand, or the uncertain microphone calling his name. What he decided would determine not just his career, but his entire approach to balancing security with dreams, certainty with possibility. Perry chose the microphone, but he carried the barbershop with him. The attention to detail, the commitment to making people feel good about themselves, the understanding that the best service came from genuine care rather than flashy technique. The Freddie Carlone Orchestra wasn't exactly the big time. Local dances, wedding receptions, small-town celebrations throughout Pennsylvania and Ohio. But it was Perry's university where he learned that singing wasn't about impressing people. It was about reaching them. Audiences began to notice something different when Perry stepped to the microphone. He didn't belt or showboat like other singers of the era. Instead, he seemed to whisper directly to each person in the room, creating intimacy in crowded spaces. Dance floors filled when his voice floated over the crowd. Word spread about the band's young singer who could make every listener feel personally serenaded. The breakthrough came in 1936 when Ted Weems, leader of one of America's most popular dance bands, heard Perry perform at a club in Warren, Ohio. Weems was known for his talent-spotting ability, but when he heard Perry Como, he recognized something beyond mere talent. He heard the sound of someone who understood that music was a conversation, not a performance. The offer to join Ted Weems meant national exposure, radio broadcasts, recordings, and a salary that would have seemed impossible just 3 years earlier. But it also meant leaving Pennsylvania, abandoning the familiar world of Canonsburg, and stepping fully into the uncertain realm of show business. Perry agonized over the decision for weeks, the barber's practical nature warring with the musician's growing confidence. The choice revealed everything about Perry Como's character. He said yes to opportunity, but he insisted on bringing his values with him. While other singers in the Weems band networked aggressively and angled for better billing, Perry simply showed up, sang beautifully, and wrote letters to Roselle. Success with Ted Weems taught him something crucial. Authenticity wasn't a limitation. It was his secret weapon. But success also revealed the first cracks in Perry's relationship with fame. The adoring crowds, the constant travel, the pressure to maintain his image, all of it felt foreign to the barber's son who had found his calling in making one person at a time feel special. Was this the price of dreams? The barber who never stopped listening was learning that sometimes the hardest part about achieving your goals is discovering who you become in the process. When Pearl Harbor shattered America's sense of security in December 1941, it also shattered Perry Como's carefully built career. Ted Weems dissolved his orchestra to join the Merchant Marine, leaving Perry without a band and facing the most crucial decision of his life: return to the safety of his barbershop, or risk everything on a solo career that might never materialize. At 29, Perry stood at the crossroads that define a life. The practical choice beckoned: Canonsburg, the familiar barbershop, Roselle, and the quiet contentment of serving his community one haircut at a time. His old customers would welcome him back with open arms. The barbershop was still available. Security was waiting with scissors in hand. But something had changed in Perry Como during those years with Ted Weems. The shy young man who had reluctantly left his barbershop had discovered not just his voice, but his purpose. Music wasn't just what he did, it was who he was. The thought of silencing the voice that had brought joy to thousands felt like betraying something sacred. The decision to pursue a solo career in 1942 was the boldest move Perry Como would ever make. He signed with RCA Victor Records, beginning a relationship that would last 44 years, one of the longest in music history. The recordings he made during this period, Prisoner of Love, Long Ago and Far Away, Until the End of Time, would become classics. But at the time, they represented an enormous gamble by a man who had learned to listen to his heart as carefully as he listened to his customers. The gamble paid off beyond Perry's wildest dreams. Till the End of Time spent 10 weeks at #1 in 1945, selling over 3 million copies and capturing the mood of a nation celebrating victory and dreaming of peacetime prosperity. Perry's delivery was neither overly dramatic nor artificially casual. It was simply honest, and that honesty connected with listeners who had endured years of uncertainty and loss. Success brought opportunities in radio, where Perry's conversational style made him perfect for the intimate medium. His weekly radio show allowed listeners to feel as though Perry Como was performing in their living rooms, creating the kind of personal connection that few entertainers could match. Fan letters poured in from across the country, praising not just his voice, but his apparent genuineness in an industry known for artifice. But it was television that would transform Perry Como from successful singer into American institution. When NBC approached him about hosting a weekly variety show in 1948, Perry was hesitant. Television was new and uncertain, and Perry wasn't convinced he had the personality for it. He was a singer, not a showman. The executives at NBC saw something Perry didn't see in himself. His natural warmth and lack of pretension were exactly what television needed. In an age when many performers seemed artificial on camera, Perry came across as genuine and approachable, the kind of person viewers would invite into their homes week after week. The first time Perry Como appeared on television, magic happened. Not the flashy, desperate magic of vaudeville, but something quieter and more profound. Wearing a comfortable cardigan, sitting in what looked like his own living room, Perry sang as if he were serenading old friends. The barber who never stopped listening had found his perfect medium, a technology that could bring his gift for intimacy into millions of homes simultaneously. Was this the moment when Perry Como stopped being just another entertainer and became something unprecedented? A star who felt like family? The answer would unfold over the next decade, as America discovered that sometimes the most revolutionary thing a performer could do was simply be themselves. The Perry Como Show premiered in 1948 and quickly became more than just entertainment. It became a weekly ritual for families across America. Perry's format was deceptively simple. Sing a few songs, chat casually with guests, and create an atmosphere that felt more like a relaxed evening with friends than a traditional variety show. He often performed while seated in a comfortable chair, sometimes appearing so relaxed that he seemed to have wandered onto the set by accident. This casual approach became Perry's revolutionary signature. In an industry built on desperation and spectacle, Perry Como's apparent effortlessness was both his greatest strength and his most sophisticated performance. Audiences began to believe that singing came naturally to Perry, that he simply walked onto a stage and magic happened. They didn't see the hours of rehearsal, the careful song selection, the meticulous attention to every detail. The barber who never stopped listening had learned to make work look like play. The 1950s belonged to Perry Como in ways that few entertainers have ever owned a decade. His television show consistently ranked among America's top programs, his records topped charts with clockwork regularity, and his Christmas specials became annual traditions that families planned their holidays around. He had achieved something that seemed impossible in show business. Universal appeal without controversy. Massive success without scandal. Catch a Falling Star, released in 1957, became Perry's signature song and the first recording to earn a gold record from the newly formed Recording Industry Association of America. The song's gentle philosophy about catching and storing life's beautiful moments perfectly captured Perry's approach to both music and life. He wasn't trying to shock or provoke. He was offering comfort and beauty to anyone willing to listen. But success created its own pressures. Music critics began dismissing Perry as too easy, arguing that his smooth delivery lacked the complexity of jazz singers or the energy of emerging rock and roll. The barber who never stopped listening found himself caught between conflicting demands. Stay true to what made him special, or adapt to changing tastes. His choice would define not just his career, but his character. Perry chose authenticity over adaptation. When rock and roll began dominating charts, he didn't attempt to transform his style. Instead, he doubled down on his commitment to the music and presentation that had made him famous. This decision revealed both his greatest strength and his potential vulnerability. The integrity that made him trustworthy also made him seemingly inflexible. The personal cost of maintaining his image began to show in subtle ways. Perry had always been private, but constant public scrutiny made him even more guarded. Interviews became exercises in charm and deflection, with Perry skillfully avoiding topics that might reveal the man behind the performer. Even his closest associates found it difficult to penetrate the wall of professional politeness that Perry maintained. Family became his refuge and responsibility. Roselle and their children provided the normalcy Perry craved, but they also required protection from the intrusions of fame. Perry went to extraordinary lengths to shield his family from public attention, sometimes at the cost of promotional opportunities. Was this dedication admirable? Or was the man who seemed so comfortable on stage actually terrified of letting anyone see who he really was? The question that haunted Perry during this golden period was whether he was living authentically or performing a role so perfectly that he had forgotten where the act ended and the person began. His public image as the ideal family man and consummate professional was genuine, but it was also carefully constructed and rigorously maintained. In a business of excess, his lack of drama had become his drama. The 1960s arrived like a cultural earthquake, and Perry Como found himself defending territory he had never intended to claim. The assassination of President Kennedy, escalation of Vietnam civil rights struggles, and the rise of counterculture created an America that seemed to have little patience for the gentle certainties Perry represented. Young people were angry, activists were marching, and musicians were using their platforms to challenge everything. Rock and roll had evolved from rebellious fad into dominant cultural force, making Perry's smooth crooning seem quaint by comparison. The Beatles landed in 1964, bringing not just new sounds but new attitudes about what it meant to be a popular entertainer. They were irreverent where Perry was respectful, energetic where he was calm, controversial where he was safe. Perry watched these changes with the detached interest of a professional observer, but he refused to adapt his approach to match the times. When television producers suggested updating his format for younger viewers, Perry politely declined. When record executives encouraged him to experiment with contemporary styles, he stuck to standards and ballads. This wasn't stubbornness. It was artistic integrity carried to its logical extreme. But integrity came with a price that Perry hadn't anticipated. His television ratings began to slip as younger viewers tuned into programs that reflected their own energy and concerns. His record sales, while still respectable, no longer dominated charts as they once had. Entertainment reporters began writing about Perry Como in the past tense, treating him as a beloved relic rather than a contemporary force. The most telling moment came during a television special when Perry was asked to perform with several rock artists. The producers clearly intended this as a demonstration of Perry's obsolescence, the old-fashioned crooner struggling to keep up with energetic young stars. Instead, Perry's performance revealed something unexpected. While he couldn't match the raw energy around him, his seasoned professionalism and genuine warmth created a different kind of magic. For a brief moment, the contrast between styles became conversation rather than competition. Perry's gentle approach provided counterpoint to the intensity surrounding him, suggesting that there might be room in American culture for both revolution and reflection. It was a masterful demonstration of how an artist could maintain relevance not by changing what they did, but by doing it so well that it transcended trends. The barber who never stopped listening faced a new challenge: how to remain true to himself in a world that seemed to be rejecting everything he represented. His response would determine not just his survival, but his legacy. Could an entertainer built on one era's values survive in a time that questioned those very foundations? The answer lay not in grand gestures or dramatic reinvention, but in Perry Como's characteristic approach. Quiet persistence, unwavering quality, and faith that authenticity never truly goes out of style. The question was whether America would remember what it had loved about him before it discovered what it thought it wanted instead. By the early 1970s, Perry Como had made peace with his changing role in American entertainment. He was no longer the dominant force he had been, but he had found something perhaps more valuable: the freedom to be exactly who he was without pressure to chase trends or maintain relevance at any cost. This liberation allowed Perry to explore aspects of his artistry that had always been present but sometimes overshadowed by commercial considerations. His Christmas specials during this period became annual events that transcended generational boundaries. While young people might dismiss Perry's regular television appearances as dated, they still gathered around television sets each December to watch him perform holiday classics with warmth and sincerity that seemed to embody the season's spirit. These specials reminded audiences why they had fallen in love with Perry Como in the first place, not because he was fashionable, but because he was genuine. The key to Perry's enduring appeal was his understanding that entertainment was about more than following trends. While other performers scrambled to reinvent themselves for each cultural movement, Perry remained consistent, allowing audiences to rediscover his value on their own terms. He became a refuge for listeners exhausted by constant demands for their attention and appreciation. This period revealed Perry's growth as an artist. Free from pressure to maintain his chart position, he began exploring more subtle and sophisticated material. His interpretations of classic songs took on new depth and nuance, as if he was finally allowing himself to reveal the complexity that had always existed beneath his smooth surface. Critics who had dismissed him as lightweight began recognizing the artistry that had been there all along. Perry's relationship with his audience evolved as well. Rather than trying to attract new fans, he deepened his connection with listeners who had supported him throughout his career. His performances became conversations with old friends rather than auditions for new ones. This shift allowed for a more intimate and honest form of entertainment that was perhaps more satisfying than the broad popularity he had once enjoyed. The business of show business continued changing around Perry, but he adapted by becoming more selective about his commitments. He reduced television appearances, choosing quality over quantity. He focused on recording projects that genuinely interested him rather than chasing commercial success. He spent more time with his family, finally able to enjoy the fruits of decades of hard work without constant pressure to maintain his entertainment hierarchy position. But this period of artistic and personal fulfillment also forced Perry to confront the reality of aging in an industry that prized youth above all else. His voice remained strong and his professionalism intact, but he could no longer ignore time's passage. The question that began haunting Perry wasn't whether he could continue performing, but whether he should. The barber who never stopped listening began hearing something new in the silence between songs. The sound of completeness, of a job well done, of a life lived on his own terms. He had proven that an entertainer could achieve massive success without sacrificing personal integrity. That fame could be handled with grace rather than excess. That entertainment could be both profitable and genuinely uplifting. As the 1980s approached, Perry faced the final choice of his career: how to end a story that had defied every convention of show business success. The man who had accidentally become a star was contemplating how to gracefully become a private citizen once again. Would his exit be as revolutionary as his entrance? A quiet departure that spoke louder than any dramatic farewell. The 1990s found Perry Como in a position that few entertainers ever experience: the freedom to perform only when and how he chose. His decision to significantly reduce public appearances wasn't driven by declining ability or lack of demand, but by deep satisfaction with what he had accomplished and a desire to spend his remaining years focused on relationships and experiences that mattered most. Perry's final recordings possessed a poignancy that hadn't been present in his earlier work. Songs about love, loss, and time's passage took on new meaning when delivered by a performer who had lived through 8 decades and witnessed American culture's complete transformation. His voice retained its smoothness but now carried experience's weight in ways that made even familiar material sound fresh and meaningful. The few concerts Perry performed during these years became special events, drawing audiences who understood they might be witnessing an era's end. These performances were characterized by intimacy and spontaneity that had sometimes been missing from his more commercial work. Free from television formats and recording schedules, Perry could simply sing the songs he loved for people who appreciated not just his talent but his longevity and consistency. Family became Perry's life's central focus in ways that had never been possible during his career's height. His marriage to Roselle, which had endured fame's pressures for over 6 decades, deepened into something approaching legendary status in an industry known for failed relationships. Their children and grandchildren provided Perry with the kind of legacy that had nothing to do with record sales or television ratings, but everything to do with values he had always held most dear. Perry's approach to this final phase reflected the same thoughtfulness that had characterized his entire career. He understood that knowing when to step away was as important as knowing how to perform. Rather than clinging to past glory or attempting comebacks that might diminish his reputation, Perry chose to let his body of work speak for itself while he enjoyed the privacy he had always craved. The entertainment industry continued evolving at breakneck speed during the 1990s, but Perry observed these changes with the detached curiosity of someone who had already played his part in the story. New technologies, new styles, new stars. They all came and went while Perry Como's recordings continued finding new audiences who discovered in his work something timeless and enduring. Health issues began affecting Perry during this period, though he faced them with the same quiet dignity that had marked his approach to everything else. He underwent heart surgery in 1993 and dealt with various ailments that come with advanced age. But he refused to let physical limitations define his final years. When he could no longer perform publicly, he found joy in private moments with family and friends. The barber who never stopped listening spent his final years doing what he had always done best, paying attention to what truly mattered. His grandchildren's laughter, Roselle's hand in his, the simple pleasure of a well-prepared meal shared with people he loved, the satisfaction of a life lived with integrity and purpose. As the new millennium approached, Perry Como prepared for his final bow with the same grace and professionalism that had defined his entire career. He had achieved something nearly impossible in American entertainment, a 7-decade career without a single major scandal, controversy, or public misstep. The boy from Canonsburg, who had reluctantly left his barbershop to sing with a local band, was ready to take his place among American entertainment legends, secure in the knowledge that he had remained true to himself throughout a journey that had exceeded his wildest dreams. "I've had a wonderful life," he had once said. "I only wish I'd realized it sooner." Now, in these quiet final years, Perry Como understood that the realization itself was the gift, that a life lived with purpose and integrity created its own form of immortality, one measured not in chart positions or award show mentions, but in the countless moments of joy he had brought to millions of people who had invited him into their homes and hearts. Perry Como passed away on May 12, 2001 at his Jupiter Inlet Colony home, surrounded by family and the quiet contentment that had defined his later years. There were no shocking revelations, no mysterious circumstances, no unanswered questions that would fuel decades of speculation. Perry's death was as understated and dignified as his life had been, the natural conclusion to a story that had been remarkable precisely because it avoided the pitfalls that claimed so many of his contemporaries. The news spread slowly, almost respectfully, as if the world understood this wasn't a moment for sensational headlines or breathless coverage. Major networks interrupted programming to announce his passing. But the tone was reverential rather than dramatic. Perry Como had died as he had lived, on his own terms, without fanfare, surrounded by love rather than celebrity. The obituaries painted a picture of an entertainer who had achieved something nearly impossible in American show business, a career spanning 6 decades without a single major scandal. Music critics who had sometimes dismissed Perry as too safe were forced to acknowledge that his consistency had been an achievement in itself. In an industry built on destroying its own stars, Perry Como had managed to remain whole. His funeral reflected Perry's values: simple, sincere, focused on what truly mattered. No screaming fans, no media circus, no dramatic tributes from celebrities seeking attention. He was laid to rest next to Roselle, who had preceded him in death by 6 years, ending one of entertainment history's most enduring love stories. The legacy Perry left behind was as complex as the man himself had been. Commercially, his achievements were staggering. Over 100 million records sold, 13 gold records, 5 Emmy Awards, a Grammy, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. By any measurable standard, Perry Como had been one of the 20th century's most successful entertainers. But Perry's true legacy lay not in awards or sales figures, but in how he had redefined what it meant to be a popular entertainer. He had proven that an artist could achieve massive success without sacrificing personal integrity. That fame could be handled with grace rather than excess. That entertainment could be both profitable and genuinely uplifting. His career became a blueprint for navigating celebrity's dangerous waters without losing one's soul. The music industry Perry left behind had changed beyond recognition from the one he had entered as a young man. The internet was revolutionizing how music was distributed and consumed. Reality television was blurring lines between talent and celebrity. Social media was creating new forms of fame that seemed to reward controversy over consistency. In this landscape, Perry Como's approach seemed both hopelessly outdated and eternally relevant. Critics and scholars began reassessing Perry's contribution to American culture in the years following his death. They recognized that his apparent simplicity had been a sophisticated artistic choice, that his refusal to court controversy had been rebellion against an industry built on manufacturing drama. Perry Como had been punk rock before punk rock existed, an artist who did exactly what he wanted, regardless of what was expected or fashionable. The barber who never stopped listening had taught America something profound about the relationship between performer and audience, between artist and authenticity, between success and satisfaction. He had shown that the most revolutionary thing an entertainer could do in a world obsessed with shock and sensation was to simply be genuine, consistent, and kind. In a business that typically devours its own, Perry Como had found a way to build a career that nourished both himself and his audience. He had left behind not just great music, but a template for how to live a life of purpose and dignity in the public eye. His greatest performance may have been his ongoing ability to remind us that sometimes the most profound art comes not from tortured genius or calculated provocation, but from the simple decision to share one's gifts while remaining true to the values that make life worth living. As his voice continues to soundtrack Christmas mornings and quiet evenings across America, Perry Como's legacy poses one final question to every performer who follows. In an industry built on noise and chaos, is there still room for someone who understood that the most powerful sound of all might just be the gentle whisper of an authentic human heart? Perry Como's greatest performance was simply being himself, but was being genuine his quiet rebellion or his final illusion?